When you look back at the history of new games and their sequels, oftentimes it's not until the second attempt at a bold new idea that things really hit their stride.
We have been waiting.
Following in the footsteps of breakthrough sequels like Borderlands 2 and Assassin's Creed 2 before it, Remnant 2 iterates on the original to phenomenal effect. Combat is even smoother and more satisfying. Loot and build crafting have been greatly improved to allow for countless possibilities and reasons to grind. Boss fights have been completely overhauled to ditch spongy bosses aided by endless waves of minions, and each of the realms feel diverse and brimming with things to do and secrets to uncover. But procedurally generated, impressively replayable levels remain its killer feature, and here they've been improved in so many ways it's alarmingly easy to lose half a day by jumping back into the same area just to see other possibilities. We don't have to wait for a third one. When it comes to games like this, the second time's the charm. Back in 2019, a lot of us, myself included, lovingly referred to the original Remnant from the Ashes as Dark Souls with guns, and the sequel seems to nod in violent agreement with that characterization. You and up to 2 allies will navigate gloriously hazardous areas packed with devilish enemies who make short work of anyone without the skill or patience to overcome its intentionally challenging levels.
Big one! Incoming!
Just like its predecessor, the surreal story has you playing as a nameless survivor in a post-apocalyptic Earth where a race of evil trees called the Root are attempting to take over the multiverse. Super weird, right?
No!
Yeah, well, the main story's not really a highlight, but that setup is used to justify you teleporting to different realities to do really awesome looter-shooter stuff and save the day.
I'm slipping! Don't let it take me!
It's not that the writing is bad, in fact, some of it is quite good. It's just that very little of it has any impact on your blank slate of a character, and it's also high concept, it often doesn't gel with an adventure that's so squarely focused on, well, this. No matter which stretch of the adventure you're working your way through, though, every second of gunplay is a totally challenging blast. Every new area is a dramatic dance of shooting, dodging, making clever use of abilities, and doing your best to not get surrounded by whatever relentless enemy is trying their best to maim and dismember you. What starts as a relatively simple toolbox spirals into a treasure trove of weapons, armor, highly customizable character classes, and mods that hasn't come close to feeling stale after my first few dozen hours. A major part of what makes combat continuously feel so fresh is that you keep hopping between different worlds in the multiverse, each with their own distinct feel and new enemies to battle. One of them, Nerud, is a sci-fi reality filled with violent robots, electronic gizmos, and laser guns. While Lassam is a fantasy realm with Cockney elves who wear bowler hats and try to cut your throat in between what I can only assume are their busy chimney-sweeping schedules.
You'll die for that!
The worlds are so starkly distinct that sometimes it's quite jarring in a good way. I mean, if you didn't know any better, would you even think that these were the same game? Each world also includes, as you'd expect, a bunch of boss battles, and this is one of those areas where you can tell that the developers listened to the community feedback about the first Remnant's boss fights lacking any real personality. I'm extremely happy to report that Remnant 2 has not only corrected this weakness, but now counts its boss fights as one of its main strengths. While there are certainly some uninspired fights, like a random lady who throws Molotov cocktails at you, and a blob monster who's just a beefier version of an existing enemy you see a lot already, the vast majority are not only delightfully difficult tests of your skill and your character's build, but also have plenty of interesting mechanics. There's one fight where looking at a boss for a few seconds makes your character go mad and die, and another where a ghost traps you in a haunted house and pops out of the walls to scratch your face off. My personal favorite is an unforgettable encounter where you become trapped in a maze and have to physically fight the labyrinth itself as you navigate it and avoid getting crushed by giant cubes. In fact, that might be my new favorite boss fight in any game, period. It's that good. In order to stay ahead of the increasingly powerful enemies and boss fights that Remnant 2 has in store, you'll need to spend a lot of time gleefully optimizing your build. The most significant and exciting decision you'll make, and then constantly iterate upon, is your archetype, aka your class. At the start, you'll pick from 4, then discover more throughout your journey if you keep an eye out for secrets. Remnant 2 sagely allows you to switch archetypes at will, so you're free to experiment and level up every role on a single character instead of restarting from scratch. Maybe you want to try out the Hunter, who highlights all enemies on the battlefield and has a passive perk that makes critical hits extend the duration of any skills you've got equipped. Or maybe the Challenger with their area of effect War Stomp and ability to automatically get back up after taking fatal damage. But the real fun comes once you unlock the ability to simultaneously equip a second archetype in the middle of the campaign. This opens up a whole new world of hybrid possibilities. Equipping the Hunter and the pet summoning Handler at the same time, for example, has some great synergy where you can direct your furry ally to distract and obstruct the enemy while you pick them off with a sniper from a distance. Beyond archetypes, there's an absolute ton of weapons, rings, amulets, and armor to round out your build, and half a dozen ways you can further modify and upgrade your equipment to your exact liking. It's a veritable buildcrafter's Shangri-La, and with most of the equipment being hidden throughout the world along with some that drop from powerful enemies, there's always a reason to get back out there and explore. All of this combines into some of the most spellbinding combat I've seen in a looter shooter in a long time, and I spent way too many hours just experimenting with different permutations of my loadout and hunting for new tools to add to my collection. While it only took me 20 hours to complete Remnant 2, that's only the beginning of the time I'll actually spend playing it. One of this series' characteristics, which is virtually unique within its genre, is its procedurally generated levels, storylines, and side quests that make each run feel different. It's both impressively unpredictable and so well organized that you could play all the way through without knowing that anything wasn't hand-built, right up until you talk to a friend about your respective playthroughs and almost immediately realize that you aren't playing the same campaign.
Ooh, how revealing.
Because every world contains 2 possible storylines, you'll almost certainly end up in different worlds in a different order, fight different bosses, and find completely different quests along the way. It's not just a matter of rearranging rooms. The differences between each run can be so dramatic, they hardly even feel like they're part of the same world. In one playthrough of a realm called Yeisha, I spent almost the entire time indoors traipsing through these dark corridors full of crazed cultists, while on another, I found myself in these dense woods, and in another still, I was lost amid this maze of hovering platforms. In one run of the fantasy world Lassam, I spent the whole time in these slums, fighting off vandals and ne'er-do-wells. In another, I spent most of my time in these gilded palaces, fighting winged angels and armored paladins. They're almost entirely different.
Tread carefully now, stranger.
You don't have to start a new campaign to experience all of the possibilities, though. After you've beaten the final boss on your first playthrough of any given world, you can immediately and infinitely re-roll that area anytime you want, generating a fresh set of quests to complete along with it. Woo! Let's go again! It's astounding to think that if I were to create a list of my favorite Souls-likes, my favorite looter shooters, and my favorite procedurally generated games, Remnant 2 would appear on all of those lists. This is a triumphant sequel that doesn't just reimagine the Souls-like genre as a co-op looter shooter, but absolutely nails that concept in every way, including many that the original Remnant did not, with completely engrossing combat, challenging and memorable boss fights, ultra-dense build-crafting options, incredibly cool dynamic levels, and a clever multiversal concept that allows for a ton of different adventures in one package. It's very likely going to become one of my most played games this year. No matter which part of the multiverse you find yourself in, you should do yourself a favor and play this gem. For more action, check out our reviews of Traimphant 2 and Final Fantasy XVI. And for everything else, stick with IGN.